All right, guys, let's talk about simplifying some numbers, specifically simplifying some imaginary numbers. So dealing with I made a video earlier on kind of how we drive the I and what it means. I'll go over it again real quick here, but let's talk about dealing with I's with some larger exponents. So let's take I to the 15th power, I raised to the power of 15. What can we actually turn that into? So a couple of things to remember here. We really need to understand that the square root of -1 is I. Okay, and also we really need to understand that I squared equals -1. Okay, if we can remember those two, pretty much we can tackle any of these higher exponents and even some more complex problems just by remembering these two relationships right here and here. So we really got to understand that. If we can remember that, we can deal with a lot trickier versions of what's going on. Okay, so just to recall here, some of you may wonder why I squared equals -1. Well, let's go back to square root -1. Square root -1 is I, right? So this is I. I is the square root of -1. So if we take I, which is this, so let's replace I with this. If we take that and square it, right, squaring a square root, these two operations are opposites of each other. They are inverse operations. So if you ever square something that's being square rooted, well, those cancel out, right? And that just leaves us with -1. So that's why I squared equals -1. All right, well, let's tackle this one here. So what I like to do here is I like to use the power to a power property. If you remember back in 8th grade. So let's turn this exponent of 15 into something that has to deal with I squares, right? So if we can try to pull a 2 out of that. So here's how I like to think of this, is I like to go ahead and take I squared, okay, because we know what I squared is. It's -1. And let's raise that power to another power that gets us close to 15. Well, 15 is an odd number, so it's not divisible by 2, right? But if we drop this down one to say 14, okay, so we could take I squared and raise it to the power of 7, right? When we have a power to a power property, we multiply the exponents, right? So that's going to give us I to the 14th power, but we need 15. So let's just go ahead and multiply another I to the first, right? In there, and there we go. So this whole thing right here, what I just wrote, this entire expression right here is the same thing as I to the 15th. Okay? But this gives us something we can work with, working towards simplification, all right? I squared is the same thing as -1 raised to the power 7. And then we got just times I, right? Or I to the first, same thing. So we can keep going on this, right? We can take -1 and raise it to the power of 7. So -1 times itself an odd amount of times, that's going to end up giving us a -1. And then we just still have our times I there. So to make this answer written a little bit nicer, we could just call this -1I, or a little bit nicer, just call it -I, right? Let's tackle another one here. Let's get a little bit bigger. Let's do an even numbered exponent here, okay? So let's try this. So I to the 20th power, the exponents are getting a little bit high here. Again, if we can just kind of reuse this I squared idea, because we know, remember, again, we remember, hopefully, that I squared equals -1. So let's turn this into as many I squareds as we can. Okay, so I squared, let's raise that to the power of, this is actually a nice even number, right? So we could divide it by 2. So 20 divided by 2 is 10. So if we take I squared and raise that to a new power of 10, if we use the power to a power property, I squared raised to the 10th power, we multiply these two exponents, right? That gives us I to the 20th. Okay, so this whole thing I wrote right here is the same thing as I to the 20th. It's just written as a power to a power. Now what we can do is we can replace I squared with negative 1 raised to the power of 10. And we can go ahead and work that out even farther, right? Negative 1 multiplied by itself an even amount of times is going to give us just a positive 1. We don't have any i's in our answer, so that gives us a real number answer, right? So there we go, working with i's and higher exponents and how to tackle those using the utilizing the power to a power property. So there we go. Hope that helps you.